Welcome to Buffering. Today's guest is Charlene Li, bestselling author of Open Leadership and the Disruption Mindset. Charlene is a pioneer in digital transformation and leadership strategy, and her latest book, Winning with AI, will be out very soon. Hopefully very soon here for you as well, Charlene. Charlene, welcome, and we are thrilled to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
For those who joined us at Connections, you heard Charlene on the main stage sharing her expertise on all things AI and business transformation. This should really be a fantastic conversation as we dive a little bit deeper into some of these topics. So again, Charlene, really excited to have you join us and excited to get into the conversation today.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Welcome to the podcast. And
Thank you.
Charlene,
Thank you again.
I want to jump right into talking about AI a little bit. And you mentioned that in today's AI era, speed is the only moat. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and why moving fast in such a competitive is an advantage?
I would say speed is a new moat because AI technology is accessible to anyone and everyone with a browser. So all you need to have is the ability to know how to open up your browser, use language, and ask it questions. And the better the questions you ask, the better the answers that you get. So what separates the winners from the losers is going to be about how quickly you can learn and use it to actually create value in your organization. And I think the old strategic planning sort of waterfall process of setting a multi-year roadmap, it won't change because AI is constantly changing. I like to say you write your strategy in ink of what you're trying to do with your organization, and you write your roadmap in pencil. But you have to have a roadmap. Speed also builds credibility. And I think a great example of this is Coursera. Their CEO back in December of 22, when AI came out, saw this and just went, this is amazing. We need to be on it. And so by the end of that month, just a few weeks after he first got his hands on it, he had a strategic plan of how to use AI. And they launched in May 23, rolling out thousands of AI-powered courses and using it for translation purposes by the end of 2023. So a year after they discovered it, they had over 4,000 courses in 17 languages. That's speed. And again, that focus and that execution is what's really important.
That's really interesting. The Coursera example and hearing how they've rolled this out, how they've utilized AIs is very interesting. Gabe and I work with a lot of broadband service providers in the industry, of course, and a lot of leaders in these industries. So how can you kind of communicate this need for urgency, this need for that speed and acceleration without causing chaos?
Yeah, I like to say, my co-author, Cottrell Welsh, has a saying, structure without flexibility is bureaucracy. Flexibility without structure is chaos. So you need to understand the difference between chaos and rapid iteration. Moving quickly, it does not mean moving recklessly. So it's choosing iteration over perfection. We in business are always trying to make the right decision, and we need to feel like we're 100% right before we move forward. It doesn't happen with AI. You have to be able to make decisions with incomplete information. So I like to say, like, if you're 70% sure that this is the right direction to move in, then go. And so one of the biggest problems that we have in AI right now is that we're doing all these pilots because we want to see if they work. Let's see. And they never get past the pilot stage because you're not committed. And in fact, IT loves pilots because they don't actually have to do anything. I like to say, don't do pilots, do actual projects. If you know it's going to be a quick win, if it's going to help you, just take these routine, high frequency, high value workflows and automate them with AI, then commit to doing that because it's going to add so much value. I was just talking to somebody who took a process that usually took 3 hours and now takes 3 minutes. What's the value of that, right? And this is a quick win. The programmers, this company, did it in about 4 days. They just had a quick look at it. And they're like, how did you build that? Like, well, we have these tools. We know how to do this. So, I think the vendors in the space are getting better and better at delivering value very quickly for people. So a year ago, that wouldn't have been the case. But today, there are a lot more options available for companies to quickly find value and deliver it.
Yeah. To go back to something you mentioned a moment ago too, around like the leadership components of this too, this sort of leads into the next question, but I read something you wrote recently about how a couple of different companies have approached their AI strategy, and Shopify being one, and I believe Duolingo was the other one that you were comparing, and the kind of juxtaposition between those two. I'd love to hear a little bit more of your perspective around, how leaders are approaching this and approaching the different ways to tackle AI within their organizations.
Yeah, Shopify did a great job in that, again, they're a B2B company. And what the CEO said was, we are going to use AI. It's going to be reflexive in our use of AI. So he put out a mandate saying everyone needs to learn how to use AI. And before you ask for additional headcount, you need to have shown how you use AI to be able to do everything possible to make it efficient without headcount, and then you can ask for headcount. And so he was just saying this is a new way of working. And so what he is saying is we're not just going to adopt AI, we're going to adapt our organization too as well. And I think the Duolingo CEO saw this and said, hey, I want to be out there and be seen as AI first. Two key differences. They are a B2C company. And in that post, the CEO also said, and we're going to use AI to get rid of all the contractors that we use. And so again, the immediate reaction was, okay, cool, but you're using this to impact people without really first talking about the business and the people. So I like to say there's a difference between AI first and AI ready. AI first sounds like you're putting AI above people. And you can never do that. It's always people first.
Yeah.
But it's making sure that your people are AI ready. And there's a big difference between that.
I want to go back to that adopt versus adapt concept you just talked about there also. Can you explain a little bit more about how you see that difference and why it's so important in how people, pun intended, adopt AI into their organizations?
Yeah, a lot of organizations are seeing AI as just installing software. All right, we have Copilot now, we have ChatGPT, we have Gemini, go and use it. That's adopting AI. Adapting AI is when you're transforming the organization. And I think that the way to explain this is that it's like buying a gym membership and actually using it and getting fit. So you can run all these pilots and everything, but if you don't truly commit to using AI to transform your organization, and that means hard work, it means really looking at what your processes are and not just automating them, but saying, how do we rethink the way we do things? Because we have this new capability. So it requires culture transformation and not just a technology, which is why I do feel that just putting it into the hands of your CIO and asking a technical person to take care of AI and implement it is the wrong approach. It needs to be something that is taking up the attention of your executive team. I can give you one example of this.
Yeah,
IKEA,
let's hear
for
it.
example, yeah, IKEA, they put in these AI chatbots. They had something called Billy, and the chatbot handled about almost half of their customer interactions. But they didn't cut their staff. They had 1,500 call center employees that they shifted their job from just answering questions in chats and phone calls, and now trained them to become interior designers. And so it was a brand new service that took their areas of expertise, gave them a little bit of training, and the result was $1.4 billion in new revenues from these remote consulting services. So they now know all the products, they know how to put them together. They're offering this free service for people, and people are buying more. And they're really happy with the results. So that's called
amazing.
adapting AI and changing the way your business works, not just installing the software and cutting people.
Well, and I think that aligns so well to things that Zack and I talk about and opportunities we see in the broadband service provider space. That is a perfect example of how somebody could take that staff who is now, reactionary when somebody has an internet problem, they're having buffering, they're having this type of issue, they pick up the phone and call. Well, if we're solving those problems in a proactive way going forward, leveraging AI, then now I can retrain that staff to be more proactive, reach out to those customers, make sure that they're having the best possible experience. And to your point, it probably becomes an upsell or cross-sell opportunity and an opportunity to drive significant revenue where you probably weren't going to be having conversations with those people in that old world unless they were having a problem. And they're probably not excited to buy new things when they're having a problem. They just want said problem fixed. So it's a great way to shift that mindset of how people can approach this in a new way.
Right. And many of your providers have very, very thin staffs. I mean,
Yes.
they're very, very thinly staffed. And so when you can take somebody and say, So highly routine, frequent things that are very human intensive. And now I can have an AI agent take care of that. That allows you to tackle this huge long list of, my goodness, this is my wish list of things we could do for our customers. And it
Hmm.
just increases the level of service, the quality, and helps with retention. There are so many good things that come out of this. But it should never be, I think, to just say, well, we can just save costs. We can save costs in terms of the people. Well, why would you try to cut your most valuable asset? So
Hmm.
think about AI as this accelerator to amplify the work that people do.
And you talked a little bit there about the digital transformation angle as well. How would you say that AI is different from, say, something like adopting cloud in the past, or even adopting mobile a couple decades ago?
Yeah, I think cloud, moving your information from, again, on-premise to cloud or mobile apps enhanced how we worked. AI questions even just certain work even exists. And it challenges our fundamental sense of worth and in a way that previous technologies didn't. It is a crisis of identity. It's like if AI can do this work, then who am I? What's my value? What's my worth? So this isn't just about adding in technology. It's about restructuring teams and workflows in a significant way. When you move from on-premise to cloud, your workflows really didn't change. When you added mobile, you added new services and ways you could work, but your work still didn't really change that fundamentally. Here, we're talking, and people all across the board know their work is going to change, and they're highly fearful and anxious about it. And our leaders need to acknowledge that instead of sweeping it under the rug. We can't make promises like, oh, your job is safe. We can't make promises like, oh, well, sure, you're going to have a job, or it's going to remain the same. What you can promise people is that we are going to invest in training you. Your knowledge, your expertise is valuable to us. And we want to make sure that you can continue to deliver that value here or elsewhere in your career. And that means learning how to use AI and be AI fluent. So, and I think this is one of those things where, again, that these emotional stakes are much higher. People already know what's happening and they're getting more anxious if they're not gaining that training. People want training. They want to understand how this is going to impact them. And so organizations need to figure out how to deliver that training to people, both centralized in a top down way, but also from a bottom up way, because you only become fluent when you actually use it in your job. And that's very difficult training to do because everyone's job is different from everybody else's. So providing that scaffolding is what I call it, so that they can learn, use AI training wheels and get up to speed as quickly as possible.
I think there's a level of human AI collaboration there that's missing. And when I hear the AI anxieties or how we address, all of that surrounds AI, I really like to lean into the, like I said, human AI collaboration as opposed to the human replacement mindset.
Yeah. I like to say, do it with the team, not to the team. So involve them in the AI experiments. I'll give you one example. Ally Bank was doing a lot with their customer service agents, and there was a tremendous amount of fear. And they wanted to understand, like, what are you doing? This is just going to take our jobs. And they just reinforce again, we're in the human business. They really showed them how this is going to make their jobs easier, how they could focus on higher value things. And by the end of this, these people who were just fearful and anxious became these vociferous supporters. And they were saying, don't you dare take this away from me. And that's what you want. You want people who are going to be raving advocates, huge fans of this AI. And you do that from the very beginning to say, this is our strategy. This is our business strategy. This is how we're using AI to deliver that. And yes, we want to save on costs, but more importantly, we want to make this better for our customers, better for you. And if we can save costs along the way, hopefully in efficiencies that we gain. But instead of just taking it straight to the bottom line, we're going to use that to raise the top line, the revenues, which is the better way to grow. It's just better quality profits that you have.
Yeah. I was having this conversation just yesterday with a colleague about there's a lot of pressure in our industry right now to cut cost, and it's very difficult to cut cost to growth. And it's this challenge that we've seen in business for a long time when you have these types of organizations or segments of business that start to get a bit commoditized. And I think there's a lot of fear in the broadband service provider space that that's happening right now. There isn't a ton of differentiation between the services that people are selling. And I'm making that statement broadly, not for our customers specifically. But when that happens, people are looking to cut costs. But again, it's really hard to cut your way to growth. To your point, it's shifting those conversations and shifting the way that people are doing things to have them focus on the top line so that you actually can grow, but you're getting them out of those monotonous tasks that they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. My co-author of Katya was the chief data officer for Vodafone. And they faced something very similar because as a mobile carrier, people they didn't care. They would switch carriers back and forth. And she's like, people love their mobile phones. They can't live without them, but they could care less about their carrier. And so how do you elevate that connection? And so that people aren't switching back and forth, what are the ways to do that? And using AI in particular to figure out how to deliver more customized, personalized services to people so that they are happy. They're raving fans of yours rather than just like, I can't stand, I have to call them. The last thing I want to do is to call them with any questions or problems that I have versus it being a delightful experience.
Delightful. Yes. We like delightful here, and it's unfortunately doesn't always get delivered. So we were talking a little bit about kind of the challenges and these shifts, and what are the other? You put out an article, I think it might have been this week actually, around the generational perspectives and our assumptions around which generations are actually going to be really excited and interested in adopting AI. I'd be really curious to have you dive a little bit deeper into, hey, just because people are in this younger generation and they're quote unquote digital natives, like my buddy Zack here, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be enthusiastic about adopting AI. So would you mind sharing a little bit more about that article? I thought it was so fascinating.
Yeah, it was so interesting because I kept running into Gen Zers who's like, I want nothing to do with AI. We call them AI vegans because they just have sworn off of it, right?
That's
and
funny.
so they are digital natives. They grew up with it. I mean, I have two kids who are Gen Z, and they're very quick to look at and use these new tools. But being comfortable with technology doesn't mean they're positioned to benefit from it. In many ways, what's happening is they're fearful for their career growth. And they're not wrong. A lot of the research right now shows that AI is replacing entry-level tasks that traditionally allows junior staff, first of all, to be hired and then to learn. And that's how you develop the expertise. And it's so clear that the people who are benefiting from the AI the most are the people who are experts. So they're able to leverage their knowledge and be able to use AI better than others. Coding is a great example. The people who can use AI as a coding tool are the people who know how to code really well. They can see it, understand it, and just use it much better than junior people. Junior people still benefit, but it's exponential in the ways we go. So this raises the whole question, like, how do you develop expertise if AI is going to take this? And we're in this funny space right now. We haven't figured that out, which is using AI to replace it, but we're not giving people early in their careers the ability to come up and learn. And so this is creating a lot of anxiety around both job security and also skill development. So it's understandable that it's not that they're most anxious about this. So the implications for organizations is that you can't just train people on AI tools. You have to intentionally design training experiences and learning experiences that build judgment and expertise, even as AI is automating routine work. That's what I was talking about, this very customized learning that understands these are the challenges that are coming into workplace. So it's not just learning how to prompt, or my least favorite word, prompt engineering, because that just scares people. I don't know how to do engineering. If you said, look, it's prompt conversations, and we're going to show you again a new way of working and really addressing those concerns that people have. Is it going to take my job? How am I going to develop expertise? And be ready with an answer on that. And again, that requires that you have a plan and a roadmap.
I think I saw this more so when like Chat GPT first came out a couple years ago, but there was this big tech phobia out there where people immediately jumped to, this is going to replace me. This is going to make me absolute. I think we see less of that today, but there's still an element of that in the market. How do we kind of get over that initial fear, or, get people actually trying out some of these new AI tools that are being released?
Well, I mentioned a little bit that we call it prompt engineering, and it sounds a lot more complicated than it is. I believe it's getting people's hands on the tools in a structured environment. And again, this is that top-down training. And there are some universal things that people across the board can work on and use pretty quickly. So but I always try to make it personalized. Instead of taking a generic prompt that means nothing to them, ask them to come in with 5 tasks that they could have, 3 to 5 tasks that they're actively working on now, and then help them identify how and when AI would make a difference. And then have them take one of those tasks and actually use AI to accomplish that task. So I did this with a group of CEOs. One person goes, I have this presentation I have to write. And he had already written it. He already had done the slides, but he said, I'll just give it to AI, see how it did. He goes, it just wrote pretty much the same presentation. And it would have done it in the 2 minutes that I just spent on it versus the 2 days that I spent on it. This is mind blowing. And this is from a CEO who said he was pretty good at using AI. And again, when you apply it to one of your problems versus the random prompt or chat that you put in to just have you look up, it's basically a glorified Google search. When you have it actually answering questions. And I always have this one little tip because it's about prompt conversations. At the end of every question that you put into it, add, before you start, ask me any clarifying questions you may have. And so you put in all this information, you give it, outcomes, some context, some instructions and everything. And then at the end, like, ask me any questions. It's the same as if you had somebody on your team, you tell them, you give them a brain dump, and you wouldn't just say, okay, good luck, go, see ya. You'd say, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Do the same thing with AI. And it becomes a completely different experience when you have a conversation. And especially when you learn to use it as a thought partner, that's when the light bulbs go off. And so my whole point about addressing that fear and anxiety, first of all, address the fear. Is it going to take my job? Okay, we're not using this to replace, we're using this to augment. Okay, great. All right, a little bit less anxiety. Is it going to eat all my data and spit it out to the world? No, everything's close off, use a secure instance of AI. Okay, that fear. And you address every single one of those fears because if you don't address the fears, they cannot learn. And then what you're shooting for is that aha light bulb moment. Because when it comes, then it's so much easier. They're suddenly they get it. I can use this, and it's different for every person what that moment's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love
and
that.
As we talk about, go ahead, Gabe.
I was going to say, you mentioned that addressing the objection straight away. Zack and I talked about this on a podcast episode a couple episodes ago, where if people come into these meetings with that fear and with that anxiety, just address that objection straight away and take it right off the table. I think that's such a smart approach to, again, just remove that anxiety from the conversation. If you just address it straight head on, right? And then move on with the next step. The other bit that you added there around the, asking the clarifying questions, couldn't agree with that more. It's interesting. Copilot I use probably most frequently just because it's embedded into the tools that I'm using every day. And we're a Microsoft shop. And what's interesting is Copilot has now actually started to ask those clarifying questions now at the end of prompts. I've noticed it especially when I'm doing longer, deep research prompts. I write up this gigantic thing and then it comes back and asks me some additional clarifying questions. So AI is even starting to get a little bit better at doing that for you and helping you down that path of asking those clarifying questions.
And here's a pro tip. If you're using multiple AIs, you can copy and paste that same prompt, long detailed prompt, into multiple ones and see which ones ask you the best questions. Because I like to say AI has bad days. So don't always depend on just one. And so especially if I'm starting from scratch and doing a project without a lot of memory, it's not, any sort of fixed information, I'll put it across multiple engines and see which one gives me the best questions. And then I know for this particular prompt on this particular day, this is the best one to use.
I like to think of that as split testing my AI. I think, Gabe, I'm sure you do this as well, but every time a new model comes out from Google, ChatGPT, any of these big companies, I see people doing that. They take the same prompt or the same request and put that into AI and compare the output. Most recently, I saw it this week with, I believe ChatGPT came out with a new image generation tool, and people were comparing that to the Gemini tool that came out about a month ago and seeing the differences between these tools. So the marketer in me likes to see that as split testing. That's something we would do on, any marketing campaign, doing that same thing with AI. And now we've kind of talked about everyone's using AI to some extent now, in some new way. But how do we talk about more getting value from AI? How can companies and individuals move from playing with AI to using it in a more meaningful, impactful way?
I think companies and people need to stop asking, what can I do with AI? And start asking, what can AI do for me? And that This shift in framing changes everything. It's connecting AI back to actual strategic objectives that you have, not just what's technically possible. So once you again develop that fluency, you're starting to ask, what are the things I can use AI to do for me in particular? And so this is about moving out of the use case trap that we fall into and really focus on the top 5 or 10 strategic applications that could transform your competitive position. So again, there are some quick wins that you can do, but there are also some strategic wins that may take a little bit longer, but they're just huge. I mean, one organization said, if we can achieve our strategic objectives in 4 years instead of 5 because of AI, that's a win. So how do we do that? So I encourage you to use what we call a double S matrix. It's speed to value and the size of value. So again, there may be ones that are really quick speed to values, like again, automating workflows is a really quick way to see value. But again, looking and creating, so like RFPs or looking for exceptions in invoices and billing mistakes and errors. So those might be some really quick wins that you can use with AI. But longer term ones, like doing strategic planning, for example, with AI, to look at all the different scenarios that you have, that may take longer because of all the various inputs and the fine tuning you have to do. And the key thing here is don't let feasibility hold you back. A lot of people will say, well, we can't do that. It's not feasible. I'm like, no one is feasible. Nothing is feasible right now with AI. No one can do anything with it. But if it's strategic to you, you will find a way. You will find the technology. You will find the people. You'll find the consultants. But if it's strategic to you, you're not going to determine things on a pilot, whether it works or not. It's not like, well, it didn't work in a pilot, so we're not going to do it, because no, it's important to us strategically. So we'll find a way to make it work. You will pivot. You will persist. You'll figure it out. So this is why I think it's so important to move out of pilots into actual projects. You're committed to making this project work because it's strategically important.
Yeah, I love that, moving from pilots to projects. I think that's a great way to frame it up. So as we kind of wrap up the conversation here, Charlene, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, you're thinking about this stuff all of the time, probably way more than than the average person is. As you look ahead to 2026, what's a bold prediction you have around AI that you think is right in front of us?
I think 2026 is the year that the AI gap becomes permanent. The companies that move ahead with speed are going to hit escape velocity. They'll be able to compound their advantages in learning, in talent, and capability, and they'll become almost impossible to catch. So I think this is the year where closing that gap, really moving with speed and agility, becomes extremely important, because the people who will are going to just pull ahead. I think it's also a time where we're going to see the rise of this superhuman, is who we call them. It's somebody who is able to combine the best of AI and the best of what makes humans unique. And they're going to deliver 3 to 10 times value. And the more that companies invest in AI fluency to create these superhumans, the faster they're going to, again, reach that escape velocity. And these superhumans can do things that neither humans nor AI could accomplish alone. So investing in your people on one end, and investing on the transformation of your organization and closing that AI gap, moving as quickly as possible to establish your leadership and your competitive advantage are I think, the key things to look out for in 2026.
I'm very excited for 2026 and to see what's next with AI, which I always joke with Gabe is changing on a daily basis. Charlene, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
No, thank you again for having me.
And thank you everyone to listening to this episode of Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn.